A night when the moon wasn't full, in fact, it wasn't even there, Salim sat alone in his room. The darkness outside seemed endless, and the only light came from the glow of his phone, casting eerie shadows across his pale face. It was 3:00 a.m., a time often whispered about as the hour of spirits and strange happenings. Salim didn't believe in superstitions, or at least that's what he always told himself. But tonight felt different, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, Salim's phone vibrated, breaking the silence. A message appeared from an unknown number. "Don't open the door no matter what you hear." His fingers froze above the screen, unsure whether to laugh or worry. He nervously smirked, thinking it was just one of his friends playing a prank. But what Salim didn't know was that this was no joke. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, and the warning echoed in his mind, unsettling him more than he cared to admit. Minutes passed in silence, with Salim staring at his phone and trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. Suddenly, a soft knock echoed from his bedroom door. He slowly lifted his head, heart pounding. "Who is it?" he asked, his voice trembling. No answer came. The silence was thick, and Salim's imagination began to run wild. He stood up, walking toward the door, his heart beating unnaturally fast. He placed his hand on the handle, then remembered the message. "Don't open the door no matter what you..." Salim stepped back from the door, trying to convince himself it was just his family. But then he remembered they were away. The knocking came again, louder this time. Anxiety gripped him as he tried to rationalize the situation. He wondered if he was imagining things or if someone was really outside. The room felt colder, and the silence after each knock seemed to stretch on forever. Salim's mind raced, searching for explanations that made sense. Then came a voice from behind the door, not human but eerily familiar. "Salim, open the door, it's your mother." His eyes widened in disbelief. His mother couldn't possibly be there, she was away. The voice returned, colder and closer. "My son, please open the door, I'm freezing." Salim's breathing quickened, and he tried to reassure himself that it wasn't real. But the voice's persistence made his fear grow stronger. Despite his fear, Salim's curiosity began to overpower him. He stepped closer to the door, drawn by the strange voice and the mystery behind it. Slowly he leaned toward the peephole, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever or whatever was outside. The tension in the room was palpable, and Salim's heart raced as he prepared himself for what he might see. The warning message echoed in his mind, but curiosity was stronger. Salim saw through the peephole was not his mother. Instead, it was something twisted, its head tilted at an unnatural angle and its eyes completely black. As Salim stared in horror, the creature's other eye moved and locked onto his, staring straight into the peephole. Salim screamed and stumbled backward, his mind reeling from the shock. The knocking turned violent, echoing through the room with a force that made Salim's blood run cold. Bang, 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 the door shook as the knocking grew more violent. Salim's heart raced, and he felt trapped in his own room. Then suddenly everything went silent. The quiet was almost worse than the noise, and Salim strained to hear anything else. Then a whisper came from the other side. "I can see you." His blood ran cold, and he rushed to his bed, hiding under the blanket like a frightened child. Salim curled up under his blanket, whispering prayers with a trembling voice. Minutes passed, maybe hours, he couldn't tell anymore. The room felt colder, and the silence was oppressive. Salim tried to calm himself, but the fear wouldn't let go. He felt vulnerable and alone, hoping that whatever was outside would eventually leave. But the sense of dread only grew stronger, making it impossible for him to relax. And Salim heard the sound of the door slowly opening. No one touched it, no one opened it, but it opened. He heard footsteps inside the room, each step closer than the last. The tension was unbearable, and Salim's heart pounded in his chest. He stayed hidden, hoping the blanket would protect him, but the footsteps stopped right next to his bed. The silence was deafening, and Salim waited for what would happen next. Salim felt something sit on the bed right next to him. So close he could feel its cold breath through the blanket. The presence was chilling, and Salim's fear reached its peak. Then a whisper came right beside his ear. "I'm inside," Salim screamed and jumped off the bed, desperate to escape the invisible threat. The room was empty, the door closed, and no one was there. But the fear lingered, refusing to let him go. Salim looked around the room, trying to convince himself that he was imagining things. The door was closed, and everything seemed normal. But the sense of unease wouldn't leave him. He muttered to himself, attempting to calm down, but his nerves were frayed. The warning message echoed in his mind, and Salim wondered if he was losing his grip on reality. The room felt colder, and the shadows seemed to move. Salim approached the mirror, hoping to reassure himself that he was alone. But when he looked into the glass, he saw something standing behind him. The same twisted shape, the same black eyes. This time it wasn't smiling. Its mouth began to open slowly, wider and wider, until it became larger than its own face. Salim's fear surged as he realized he was not alone, and the creature's presence was undeniable. The creature's mouth opened impossibly wide, and a sound came out, a sound that did not belong to this world. Salim screamed and shut his eyes, trying to block out the horror. The room seemed to shift around him, and the air grew heavier. When Salim opened his eyes again, everything had changed. He was no longer in his familiar room, but somewhere else entirely. Salim found himself in an old room with cracked walls and suffocating air. The atmosphere was oppressive, and the sense of dread was overwhelming. In front of him stood a door, open, and beyond it, endless darkness. Salim's mind raced as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. The familiar warning echoed in his head, but now it felt more urgent than ever. Inside his head, Salim heard the message again. "You opened the door, and now it will never close." Whispers filled the air, growing louder and more frantic. Crying and screaming echoed from the darkness beyond the door. Salim felt trapped, unable to escape the consequences of his actions. The warning had become a reality, and the darkness seemed to reach out for him. From the darkness, a hand emerged, then another. Faces began to appear, distorted, eyeless, featureless, crawling towards Salim. He tried to run, but his body wouldn't move. The fear was paralyzing, and the creatures drew closer, their presence overwhelming. Salim's mind screamed for escape, but he was frozen, unable to act. The darkness seemed alive, hungry for him. Salim's body was frozen, unable to move as the distorted faces crawled toward him. The air was thick with whispers and cries, and Salim felt utterly helpless. The creatures' eyeless faces stared at him, their features shifting and changing. The sense of dread was overwhelming, and Salim realized he was powerless against the darkness. The warning message echoed in his mind, but it was too late. The twisted figure appeared again, closer than ever. Its presence was suffocating, and Salim felt its gaze pierce through him. The creature spoke in a deep, echoing voice, "Everyone who opens the door becomes part of it." Salim screamed, desperate to escape, but the darkness pressed in around him. The warning had become a curse, and Salim's fate was sealed. Salim's body began to crack like glass, his voice faded and his features disappeared. The darkness consumed him, and he became one of the distorted faces crawling toward the door. The transformation was painful and terrifying, and Salim's identity slipped away. The warning message echoed one last time, but Salim was no longer himself. The next morning, Salim's family returned home. The door was closed and the room was silent. Nothing seemed out of place, but Salim was gone. His phone lay on the bed, untouched. The silence was eerie, and the family wondered where Salim had gone. The warning message lingered in the air, unseen but ever present. Salim's phone buzzed, displaying a new message. It was sent from Salim's number to an unknown contact. "Don't open the door no matter what you hear." The cycle had begun again, and the warning was passed on. The phone lay silently on the bed, a chilling reminder of what had happened. The family remained unaware of the true horror lurking behind the closed door. Seconds later, a reply appeared on the phone. "Who is this?" The conversation was eerily familiar, echoing the events of the previous night. The warning message had been sent, but the recipient was unaware of the danger. The phone screen glowed in the silent room, hinting at the horror that was about to unfold once more. Then the knocking began. Knock, knock, knock. The cycle had restarted, and the warning was ignored. The room was silent, but the sound of knocking echoed through the air. The horror was not over, and the door remained a gateway to darkness. The story had come full circle, and the danger lingered. Story ends with the warning message and the knocking, but the sense of dread remains. The door that must never be opened continues to haunt those who ignore the warning. The cycle of fear and darkness is unbroken, and the mystery of the door endures. The tale serves as a chilling reminder to heed warnings, especially when they come from the unknown. Salim's isolation is highlighted by the absence of his family and the oppressive silence in his room. The loneliness amplifies his fear, making every sound and shadow more threatening. The night feels endless, and Salim's vulnerability is exposed. The warning message becomes his only connection to the outside world, but it also deepens his sense of isolation. Story takes place at 3:00 a.m., a time often associated with spirits and supernatural events. The hour adds to the tension and mystery, making Salim's experience feel even more unsettling. The darkness outside and the eerie silence inside create the perfect atmosphere for something strange to happen. Salim's disbelief in superstitions is challenged by the events of the night. Receiving a message from an unknown number is unsettling, especially when the content is cryptic and urgent. Salim's reaction is a mix of nervousness and skepticism, but the warning lingers in his mind. The unfamiliar sender adds to the mystery, making Salim question the reality of the situation. The message becomes a pivotal moment in the story. Salim's internal struggle between fear and curiosity drives the story forward. Despite the warning, his curiosity leads him to approach the door and look through the peephole. The tension between wanting to know the truth and fearing the unknown is palpable. Salim's actions reflect the universal human tendency to seek answers, even when danger is present. As the events unfold, Salim's perception of reality becomes distorted. The twisted figure, the unnatural voice, and the violent knocking all contribute to his sense of confusion and terror. The boundary between imagination and reality blurs, making Salim question everything he sees and hears. The story explores the psychological impact of fear and isolation. Salim's encounter with the twisted figure is a turning point in the story. The creature's unnatural appearance and behavior defy explanation, making Salim's fear escalate. The supernatural elements are emphasized by the creature's black eyes and distorted features. The encounter leaves Salim traumatized and desperate for escape. Violent knocking and sudden silence create a sense of unpredictability. Salim's fear is heightened by the abrupt changes in sound, making him feel vulnerable and exposed. The silence after the knocking is almost worse, as it leaves Salim waiting for the next terrifying event. The story uses sound and silence to build suspense. Salim's attempt to seek comfort by hiding under the blanket is a relatable response to fear. The blanket becomes a barrier between him and the unknown, but it offers little protection. Salim's prayers and trembling voice highlight his desperation. The scene emphasizes the vulnerability of facing supernatural threats alone. The door opening by itself is a chilling moment, suggesting that the supernatural force is powerful and unstoppable. Salim's fear intensifies as footsteps approach, and he realizes he is not alone. The unseen presence adds to the suspense, making Salim's situation feel hopeless. The story builds tension through unexplained events. Feeling the cold breath through the blanket is a terrifying experience for Salim. The presence is so close that Salim can sense its physicality even though he cannot see it. The whisper, "I'm inside," confirms that the supernatural entity has entered the room. Salim's reaction is immediate and frantic, highlighting the intensity of his fear. After Salim jumps off the bed, the room appears empty and the door is closed. Salim tries to convince himself that he imagined everything, but the lingering sense of dread remains. The illusion of safety is shattered by the events that follow. Salim's attempt to rationalize the situation is futile as the supernatural threat persists. Mirror scene is a classic horror moment with Salim seeing the twisted figure behind him. The creature's mouth opens wider than its face, creating an unnatural and terrifying image. Salim's fear reaches its peak, and the supernatural threat becomes undeniable. The mirror serves as a portal to the unknown, reflecting Salim's deepest fears. Sound that comes from the creature's mouth is described as not belonging to this world. Salim's reaction is immediate and intense as he screams and shuts his eyes. The sound marks the transition from reality to the supernatural realm, and Salim is transported elsewhere. The story uses sound to signal a shift in the narrative. Salim finds himself in an old room with cracked walls and heavy air. The setting is oppressive and claustrophobic, adding to Salim's sense of helplessness. The open door and endless darkness beyond it create a feeling of inevitability. Salim's fate is tied to the door, and the story's atmosphere becomes even more intense. The darkness beyond the door is filled with whispers, crying, and screaming. Salim is drawn toward it, but the fear is overwhelming. The darkness represents the unknown and the consequences of ignoring warnings. The story uses darkness as a metaphor for danger and loss of control. The distorted, eyeless faces crawling toward Salim are a manifestation of the door's curse. Each face represents someone who ignored the warning and became part of the darkness. Salim's transformation into one of them is a tragic end, emphasizing the power of the supernatural force. The faces are haunting and unforgettable. The story ends with the warning message being sent to a new recipient. The cycle of fear and darkness continues as the door remains a threat to anyone who ignores the warning. The repetition of events highlights the inevitability of the curse. The story's conclusion is both chilling and thought-provoking. The story explores psychological horror through Salim's isolation, fear, and inability to escape. The supernatural elements are secondary to the emotional impact of the events. Salim's descent into terror is gradual and believable, making the story resonate with anyone who has experienced fear of the unknown. The door represents a curse that traps anyone who opens it. The warning message is both a plea and a prophecy, urging others to avoid the same fate. The curse is relentless, and the door remains a gateway to darkness. The story uses the door as a symbol of danger and the consequences of curiosity. The tale of Salim and the door that must never be opened is a haunting reminder of the dangers lurking in the unknown. The cycle of warning, fear, and transformation continues, leaving a lasting impression. The story's structure emphasizes the importance of heeding warnings and respecting the boundaries between reality and the supernatural. The door remains closed, but the threat endures.